All right, let's do lesson 6, getting classy, and a couple of extra codes. I have switched modes if you're watching these in any kind of order. When I started creating all these videos, we used to use Thimble, and now I'm switching over to Replit, but you should notice that they are pretty similar. I do have to press Run in order to run the results of the code, and to open it in a new window, I can click over here. So here I've typed in some stuff. I have a style page that's already got a little bit in there. I've got my index page as always so that I have my page. And I just put in a header, a section, and a footer. Nothing too complicated going on just yet. But we will change that. So a couple of new codes in lesson 6 is a non-breaking space and a non-breaking hyphen. So what a non-breaking space is, notice this is the name of a city, Cape Girardeau. And idealistically, we don't want Cape and Girardeau to get separated from each other. We consider that, they call it like widow orphan whenever we're talking about that in English. So if I don't want Cape and Girardeau to be separated, I can't use just a regular space bar. Instead, I have to put the code for a non-breaking space. That's ampersand, NBSP, and then a semicolon. Looks kind of weird. In some editors, it will change colors. But if we hit Run here, notice now when I refresh this view, Cape and Girardeau stay next to each other. And they will, regardless of what happens, unless, of course, we just completely run out of room on the page. It'll just keep trying to scoot them down. Okay, so a lot of times, maybe like you've got the zip code or something and you don't want it to get disconnected from the state, you might do that same thing. So if I was going to add that, I put ampersand NBSP. There it comes up, non-breaking space. And then I could put in the zip code 63701, hit Run. And now those two, in addition to Cape Girardeau, will not be separated from each other. So Missouri and 63701 have to stay together. Sometimes a non-breaking space is also used in what we call just a blank paragraph. So if I just wanted to make some space in here, I could do a non-breaking space here inside a paragraph, and that's going to create basically just a blank paragraph, like an extra one where there would be a line here, except there's not. Instead, there's an empty paragraph. So that is non-breaking space. The other one that's new in this is a non-breaking hyphen. So for instance, where I have He-Man here. By the way, I didn't love He-Man characters. It's just one of those things we had around the house. So that is a hyphen, but notice it breaks. So he goes on one line and man is allowed to go on the other. And if we don't want that to happen, we have to replace with the current hyphen with a non-breaking hyphen. And there is no special letters that sound like it for this one. So it's an ampersand and then a hashtag or number sign, 8209 and a semicolon. When we hit Run here, we should notice now He-Man goes onto its own line. And it will only fit on that line if the whole word can fit. So that is a non-breaking hyphen. And so if you had the name of a city or an email address that had a dash in it, or a phone number, if you had a phone number, phone numbers have a little hyphen in there, then you might use a non-breaking hyphen in there for that. Some uncommon tags are also used in this chapter that are not very common. And so I'll show you what they look like, but they're nothing real, used a lot. So address is one of these uncommon tags, often used for addresses. So 1000 Main Street, and then I'll just put Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and then I'll just turn off this address like so. If I refresh this, notice it will add that to the bottom of the page. I did not make it in italics. It automatically rendered in italics. So notice it does not know where the lines are in here. So you would have to insert a line break where you want the line to break in that address. So this is something that, say if you're on a mobile device and it's looking for an address to store, say on your phone or something, it will look for the address tag in here to locate that. Some additional ones that aren't as common. There's BDO, which has to do with the text direction. You can take a look at that one. It's definitely not used very often. Q, which is for short quotations. So if you use a Q, this is a quote. and then we turn it off, if I run that and we take a look at that, notice I did not put in quotation marks, but the browser did. So that Q tag inserts, generally speaking, quotation marks around a quotation. And that's nice because there are some fonts that put funky looking quotation marks. Let's see if I can force some strange quotation marks in here. I'll just put them in here. Depending on the font that you have, sometimes you get what they call curly quotation marks. I don't think this one has them. Yeah, see, this one has straight quotation marks, but there are certain fonts, and you've seen them before, where there's like a dot and a curl. And so if you use the Q, usually it will put the proper ones in there. Okay, another one that is commonly used is the abbreviation tag. Usually this would go inside something. So let's say this is some nice HTML stuff. I could put an abbreviation tag around that. ABBR. This in and of itself doesn't do anything. If we take a look at this, it's not going to look any different. However, if we add an attribute, and the attribute you would use for this is title, you would then define it. So hypertext markup language is what that stands for. So now that this title attribute is in there, and if I run it, notice that in the browser we see these little dashed underline, which basically means point to me. And when you point to it, you'll see that title attribute pop up, that pop-up text that comes up. You can do the same thing with DFN, which stands for definition. If you were using something to create a definition. Notice that with definition, if we switch it out, it just appears italicized. And then you don't kind of know that you need to point at it unless you just happen to point at it. So anyway, so more commonly people use the ABBR because it does give you some sort of an indication that there's something else going on. Okay, another one is the cite tag, which is used to define the title of a work, like in an English class where you're saying in the Wall Street Journal. So I would say Wall Street Journal. And it doesn't like actually cite it for you or anything. It just puts it in there and then makes it look differently. And notice again, italics seems to be its go-to thing. So that cite tag is going to render it in italics. And then finally, the last one that's listed on here is the KBD or code tag. So if I was doing a page showing you how to do something, so let's say I have a paragraph and here's how you do this. Then I might put a line break, some code, and I would put KBD, meaning this is what you type with your keyboard. So like I would say, bracket, something, bracket, if we were doing HTML coding. Okay, and so when I hit run here, notice that it makes it look like it's in that kind of typewriter font, which is basically a monospace font that makes it look like you should type it. So when you're telling someone like this is input, then you might put that in there. Or this is code, and again, you can use the tag called code that's going to do that. So these are kind of semantic elements. I mean, like most of them do very similar things. This one just changes the font. This one, of course, made it italics. This one we could make it italics depending on which one we used. But these tell you what these do, kind of, except for Q. They kind of tell you what they do. So if somebody is glancing through a website code trying to find something, they may be looking for one of those specific terms. Okay, the other big thing, the fun thing in this chapter for lesson 6 is getting classy. And classes are basically fancy little things that you can create in order to assign specific properties to only one heading or only one line or only one word or in various places all over the place. So let's say I wanted to, I'll call this blue thing. To create a class, you put a dot. So a dot in the CSS page denotes this is a class, and you can name it whatever you want. No space bars, all lowercase. So I could say blue thing. Obviously, my blue thing's probably going to be blue, right? Maybe I want my blue thing to be bold, so I'll give it a font weight. Maybe I want it to also be italic, so I'll give it a italic as well. So that's going to give me my blue thing as a class. Again, that dot denotes that it's a class. If I go back to my HTML page, I could then say, all right, I want this site to use the class. And the class that I have is called blue thing. And there it is. And now, since I've attached it to, I just spacebarred inside and attached it, it's an attribute to site. Notice this is now blue, and I could attach it to anything. I could attach it to this heading too. I could say class equals blue thing. Notice it does see that that is my class in there. And then when I run, my H2 then will be blue. So you can attach it to anything. But say, what if you wanted to attach it to the word Batman here? I don't have a tag around Batman. I don't want to add any additional tags. Well, they make a kind of a multi-purpose tag called a span tag. Span basically means you can put it around anything just so you can attach an attribute to it. So I can say span class equals blue thing, like so. And then when I run it, that will put it on that specific word. So a span is just kind of a placeholder. It's just so we can attach a class to it. And you can put lots and lots of different things in a class. So a class is kind of better. Like if I know there's things that I want to center all the time, instead of styling everything center all the time, I could make a class called center that. And then I can go ahead and text align center. And then anytime I want to center something, instead of having to put style equals text align center, then I could just go through in here and apply that class. So I can say center that as the class, and then it will center it in there. See, now it's centered. Okay, so it's just a little more versatile to create classes, and then you can reuse your classes. And then if you decided, I want everything that's centered to also be, something else, then you can add that into the class, and then they would all update, just like if you had used it inside of a normal element, like so. So that is how you can create classes, and again, you can apply pretty much any attributes at all, or any property value sets at all, as long as it works with whatever you're putting it on. If I can't center an image, so I can't put this on a center on an image. But anyway, so that is, in a nutshell, lesson 6.